July 13th, 1985. Wembley Stadium. 72,000 people in the crowd. 1.5 billion watching worldwide. Queen takes the stage for what would become the greatest live performance in rock history. But here's what most people don't know. This iconic moment almost never happened. Just weeks before Live Aid, Queen wasn't even speaking to each other. They were exhausted, divided, and ready to call it quits. The world's greatest rock band was on the verge of breaking up. This is the untold story of how Queen almost fell apart before their finest hour. To understand how close Queen came to disaster, we need to rewind to 1982. After dominating the late 70s and early 80s with massive hits, Queen released Hot Space in 1982. The album was a radical departure, heavy on disco, funk, and electronic music. Fans were confused. Critics were brutal. And in America, it was a commercial disaster. The cracks started showing immediately. Brian May felt the album had gone too far from their rock roots. Roger Taylor was frustrated with the musical direction. John Deacon kept quiet, as always. And Freddie Mercury? He was already looking toward a solo career. The tension became unbearable during interviews. In one particularly revealing 1984 interview, Freddie admitted,
I mean, if we didn't like the music that we were making, we'd say goodbye to each other. Because, there's nothing else left.
There's nothing else left between us. Just the music. Think about that. The man who commanded stadiums, who could make 72,000 people move as one, said there was nothing left connecting him to his bandmates except the work. Roger Taylor and Brian May had already recorded solo albums. Mercury was preparing his own, Mr. Bad Guy, a dance pop album that would be released in April 1985. The band that had conquered the world was slowly drifting apart. But in 1984, they decided to try one more time. They went back to the studio to record the works. This time, they consciously returned to their rock sound. Radio Gaga became a massive hit. I Want to Break Free was classic Queen. Hammer to Fall showed they could still rock harder than anyone. The album was a commercial success, especially in the UK. They embarked on a world tour starting in August 1984, playing massive stadiums across Europe, South Africa, South America, and Asia. But behind the success, the problems were getting worse. The Works tour should have been a triumph. Instead, it became a nightmare that nearly destroyed the band. First, there was the South Africa controversy. Queen played Sun City in October 1984, defying a United Nations cultural boycott against apartheid. The backlash was brutal. They were accused of putting money before principles. The criticism stung, and it drove another wedge between band members who were already barely speaking. Then came the American disaster with the I Want to Break Free video. The cross-dressing concept, which was hilarious to British audiences, horrified conservative American broadcasters. MTV refused to play it. Radio stations dropped them. Their U.S. popularity, already damaged by Hot Space, completely collapsed. Mercury blamed their American label Elektra for not promoting them properly. The rest of the band blamed Mercury for the controversial video concept. Everyone was pointing fingers. By the time the tour reached its final leg in 1985, the band members were physically and emotionally exhausted. Tour reports described Freddie's voice deteriorating at certain shows. Brian May later admitted some performances during that period were among the worst of their career. They weren't just tired, they were broken. The final show of the Works tour was in May 1985, just 8 weeks before Live Aid. After that last concert, the band members went their separate ways, without even discussing when or if they would work together again. Brian May described the situation. Freddie had stepped so far away, I thought we might not get him back. Mercury was focused entirely on his solo album. May and Taylor were pursuing their own projects. John Deacon, the band's quiet foundation, was contemplating retirement. Queen, one of the biggest rock bands in the world, was imploding. Then came the phone call that would change rock history. Bob Geldof, the organizer of Live Aid, wanted Queen on the bill. But there was a problem. Geldof was a product of the punk generation. He thought Queen was past their prime, too theatrical, not socially conscious enough. The South Africa controversy hadn't helped their image. But Geldof knew one thing. Queen could put on a show. So we reached out. Queen's response, they said no.
Called Spike. Spike said, I honestly don't think they'll do it, Bob. It hasn't been amazing. Everyone's tired, and I think Fred's going to go off and make a solo album. And that largely is that a band's had it, you know, when the singer goes off. A couple of days later, phone calls, Bobsy. I said, hi, Fred. And he said, so what's all this about, darling? And I said, well, you know, or he said, oh, it's wonderful. It's just not really our thing, is it? And I said, well, I don't know. It's everybody's thing, isn't it? So it ended up with me not being very persuasive and him trying to argue with me that they shouldn't really do it.
Brian May recalled, we definitely hesitated to say yes. We had to consider whether we were in good enough shape. The chances of making fools of ourselves were so big. They had good reasons to be scared. They hadn't performed together in weeks. Personal relationships were at an all-time low. Mercury was distracted by his solo career, and with 1.5 billion people watching worldwide, any mistake would be catastrophic. When Mercury's keyboard player Spike Edney delivered Geldof's invitation, Freddie's response was telling. I haven't got the right feeling for this. Coming from a man who lived for performance, that statement said everything about the band's state. Geldof didn't give up. He called again. This time his message was blunt, delivered through Roger Taylor. Tell the old fuckers it's going to be the biggest thing ever. That got their attention. The band held a meeting. They looked at each other. These four men who had created magic together, but could barely stand to be in the same room, and made a decision. They would do it. One last performance, maybe their last performance ever. But if they were going to do this, they were going to do it right. Queen had exactly 20 minutes on stage, not a second more, with dozens of acts performing, Paul McCartney, U2, David Bowie, Led Zeppelin. Every band was under strict time limits. For 3 days, Queen locked themselves in London's Shaw Theatre and rehearsed. They didn't just practice songs. They timed everything, down to the second. Which songs would give maximum crowd impact? How could they pack the most energy into 20 minutes? The set list was strategic perfection. Snippets of Bohemian Rhapsody, Radio Gaga, Hammer to Fall, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, We Will Rock You, and the massive closer, We Are the Champions. They hired a lighting technician to sneak them extra power, so their sound would be louder than other acts. They studied the stage layout, the camera positions, everything. If this was going to be Queen's last stand, it would be unforgettable. July 13th arrived. Queen went on stage between Dire Straits and David Bowie. Freddie Mercury bounded out wearing his famous white tank top and jeans, his signature short haircut making him look both powerful and vulnerable. What happened next is now legend. Mercury commanded that crowd like a god. The call and response section, "Ayo," became iconic. Every person in that stadium moved as one. Every head nodded in perfect synchronization to Radio Gaga, and the world watched in awe. Bob Geldof later said, Queen were absolutely the best band of the day. They understood the idea exactly, that it was a global jukebox. They just went and smashed one hit after another. When Mercury hammered out those final notes of We Are the Champions, 72,000 people sang along. The band members looked at each other with something they hadn't felt in years. Pride. After Live Aid, everything changed. The performance became the most watched moment of the entire event. Queen's Greatest Hits album jumped 55 positions on the UK charts. Mercury's solo album also charted. Suddenly, everyone wanted to see Queen again. More importantly, the band members remembered why they had started this journey together. The tensions didn't disappear overnight, but Live Aid gave them something they desperately needed. Perspective. Brian May later reflected, it was the perfect stage for Freddie, the whole world. In 2005, a poll of music industry insiders voted Queen's Live Aid performance as the greatest rock performance of all time. It beat the Rolling Stones at Altamont, the Beatles at Shea Stadium, Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, everything. The irony is perfect. Queen's finest moment came when they were at their lowest point. The performance that saved them happened when they were ready to quit. Sometimes the greatest triumphs come not from strength, but from finding strength when you have nothing left. Queen almost fell apart before Live Aid. Instead, they gave us 20 minutes that changed rock history forever. If you enjoyed this deep dive into rock history, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that like button. We've got more untold stories coming your way. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.